Up for you.
That's right. And forget just a simple yes or no. We've got this really interesting podcast script called Is the American Dream Dead? The Crisis of a Broken Promise.
Right.
And our goal is really to unpack its arguments, the data points, and importantly, the personal stories it features. They bring it to life.
Yeah, definitely. So our mission together is to get to the core of it, move past the easy answers, and figure out what's really shaping things right now.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. This idea of the American dream, it wasn't always this like specific picture we have now, was it?
No, not at all. The script actually points out it was coined way back in 1931. Historian James Truslow Adams.
Yeah, that's right.
And his vision was quite broad, a life that should be better, richer, fuller for everyone, regardless of where they started. Very aspirational.
Better, richer, fuller. Okay, and then it feels like after World War II, things got a bit more concrete.
Oh, definitely. That's when that familiar image really took hold. Owning a home, that was huge.
The house, the picket fence.
Exactly. And a secure retirement, maybe a pension. And the big one, your kids achieving even more than you did. That upward mobility.
That was a core promise, wasn't it?
Precisely. That post-WWII era really cemented that specific vision. Home ownership, stable career, retirement, kids moving up. It was powerful, widely shared.
But wow, that picture looks pretty different today based on the script.
Yeah.
It throws out some really striking numbers about homeowners.
It really does. Just think about this. Back in 1970, almost 80%, 79% of 30-year-olds owned their homes.
79%?
Yeah. Now, that number's plummeted. It's just 42%.
Wow, less than half. That's a key insight right there, isn't it? That cornerstone piece is just way less attainable.
It signals a massive shift in economic opportunity, definitely.
And when you look at the basic economics laid out here, okay, median home price, what, $420,000 compared to a median wage of $45,000? It's pretty clear why that homeownership dream feels so far off for so many.
Absolutely. It really highlights what economist Mark Zandi apparently calls the great disconnect.
The great disconnect, okay.
And what's really fascinating or maybe worrying is the gap between productivity and wages. Since 1980, workers have become way more productive, like tripled the upward.
Tripled.
Yeah.
Yep.
But wages, they've only gone up about 14%.
Only 14%. So all that extra value being created, it's not really flowing down to the workers.
That's the disconnect. The wealth generated isn't translating into higher pay for your average worker. It seems to be concentrating, well, elsewhere.
And I guess that concentration really shows up when you look at CEO pay versus worker pay.
Exactly. The script points out CEOs now rake in, on average, 300 times what their average employees make.
300 times. That really paints a picture of that inequality, that feeling that the rewards aren't being shared fairly.
It absolutely underscores it.
So, okay, these traditional markers, home, stable job, retirement, they're getting harder. And the script also touches on like what entry-level work even looks like now, especially for Gen Z.
Right. It mentions things like being an Uber driver or, a TikTok creator or just piecing things together in the gig economy.
Yeah.
And that raises a really interesting question for everyone listening, doesn't it? How does the stability and security of that kind of work compare to those traditional careers?
Right, the ones that were supposed to be the foundation of that post-war dream.
Exactly. The gig economy might offer flexibility, sure, but it often lacks the benefits, the safety net, health insurance, retirement plans, things that used to be more standard.
Okay, so it's looking like it's maybe not just about working hard anymore. There seem to be these bigger systemic things getting in the way.
That's a really crucial takeaway from the script, I think. It dives into these systemic hurdles, like the housing crisis.
The fact that private equity firms have bought up so many homes, the script says 1 in 7 since 2020.
1 in 7.
Yeah, that's definitely played a role in pushing up rents and making it harder to buy, especially for first-timers competing against big investment firms.
Right, you can't compete with that kind of cash. And then there's the other massive one. Education costs.
Oh, absolutely staggering. A 1,200% increase in college tuition since 1980.
1,200%.
It's a massive burden. And that average student debt figure, $37,000. It's like an anchor for people trying to get started.
Yeah. Delaying everything else, buying a home, starting a family.
Exactly. For so many listeners with student loans, I imagine those numbers really hit home.
And it's not just about getting ahead financially, is it? It's also basic well-being, like healthcare. The script mentions that too.
Yeah, and that's deeply concerning, the statistic that 40% of Americans apparently skip needed medical care because they can't afford it.
40%. It says a lot about accessing essential services. It really makes you question that fundamental security the dream was supposed to represent.
Definitely. All this paints a pretty tough picture for, climbing the ladder. And the script mentions a Harvard study from 2024.
Yes, that study is quite sobering. It basically says that if you're born into poverty in the US today, you actually have a lower chance of escaping it compared to kids in places like Canada or Germany.
Lower than Canada or Germany. Wow. That really challenges that core idea, doesn't it? That anyone can make it if they just work hard enough.
It directly challenges that core tenet.
It almost feels like, well, the script quotes author Matthew Desmond calling it a rigged game where the house always wins.
That analogy really captures that feeling of systemic disadvantage that so many people seem to be experiencing. It suggests the obstacles aren't just individual, but kind of baked into the system.
And to really get a feel for the impact, the script shares some personal stories, which I think are super important. Let's talk about Jasmine first.
Yeah, these stories really ground the statistics, don't they? Jasmine, 29, teacher in Phoenix, making $52,000. Sounds okay, right?
Yeah, decent salary?
But her rent is $2,200 a month.
Oof, that eats up a huge chunk.
Exactly. And her comparison point, her parents owned a home when they were just 25. It just starkly shows how much things have changed for her generation.
It really does. And then there's Carlos, 34, tech worker. Did everything right.
Right, the college degree, the internships, the whole checklist.
He gets laid off. And now he's doing DoorDash just to cover $800 a month in loan payments.
Ugh. That story really hits hard because it challenges that narrative. Just follow the rules and you'll be fine. He did, and he's still in a really tough spot.
Yeah, it highlights that vulnerability even when you've done everything you were supposed to.
Precisely. It undermines that feeling of security.
And it's not just younger folks either. Linda's story. Retired nurse, 68 years old.
Yeah, Linda's experience is a stark reminder that security isn't guaranteed, even later in life. She lost her pension in the 2008 financial crisis.
Oh, wow. And now, at 68, she's working for Amazon Flex.
After a career in nursing. That's tough. It shows how fragile even those traditional safety nets have become.
It really does. Makes you wonder about long-term security as these old structures change or just disappear.
But, okay, the script doesn't just paint a bleak picture. It also raises this idea, maybe the dream isn't dead, but it's changing, evolving.
Right, and it's crucial we consider that. Is the definition itself shifting? Like, take remote work. That potentially allows people to decouple their salary from the crazy cost of living in big cities.
Yeah, earn a New York salary but live somewhere much cheaper. The script mentions Bali even.
Exactly. That's a fundamentally different way of thinking about achieving a quote-unquote better life.
And there's also that huge entrepreneurial thing happening, especially with Gen Z, the side hustle economy.
Oh, absolutely. The scale is massive. The script mentions $1.2 trillion for Gen Z side hustles.
Wow, trillion. Yeah. It suggests a real drive for autonomy, for control over how they earn money, even if it's not the old 9-to-5 path. Maybe that is a new form of the dream.
Interesting. And policy stuff comes up too, like President Biden's student debt relief efforts.
Yeah, those are mentioned as a direct attempt to tackle one of those big systemic issues, student debt, erasing $150 billion in debt.
That's got to make a difference for those people.
Undoubtedly. It potentially frees up resources, maybe lets them pursue other goals like homeownership a bit sooner, though, of course, those policies are debated.
Right, right. And then there's this really interesting idea from tech mogul Arlen Hamilton saying the new dream is more about autonomy than, like, owning a house.
It is thought-provoking. Hamilton's view suggests maybe a shift away from purely material goals towards more freedom, flexibility, control over your life and work.
Which sounds good.
It does, but the script asks a great question. Is this real liberation, choosing autonomy? Or is it kind of making the best of a situation where those traditional things, like houses, are just harder to get? Resignation, almost.
Liberation or resignation? That's something to chew on.
Definitely something for listeners to consider for themselves.
So, okay, if the old dream is struggling, what about ways forward? Does the script offer potential solutions?
It touches on a range, yeah, often reflecting different political viewpoints. On the progressive side, you hear ideas like, well, taxing billionaires more heavily
Okay.
and using that revenue perhaps for big investments like building a lot of affordable homes. The script mentioned a figure of 10 million.
10 million homes. Wow. And what about from a more libertarian perspective?
There, the focus tends to be more on deregulation. The idea is that cutting red tape will spark innovation, create more opportunity naturally.
Let the market work it out.
Essentially, yeah. And the script also mentions things like cryptocurrency, potentially disrupting traditional banking, offering alternative financial routes.
Interesting. And it also brings up Gen Z's priorities again, noting how much they seem to care about climate justice.
Yeah, that 60% figure focusing on climate justice is really significant.
Yeah, so
Well, if younger generations are prioritizing that over, say, the big house and two cars, it could signal a real shift in what success even means.
right, maybe they're willing to trade some traditional material goals for a more sustainable future.
It's possible it could fundamentally change the definition of a desirable life.
And then there's this quite challenging argument from historian Heather Cox Richardson that the traditional dream was always kind of exclusionary.
Yeah, her point really pushes us to think critically about who actually benefited from that post-WWII ideal. Was it truly accessible to everyone?
Mm.
And her suggestion is maybe we need to dismantle that old framework entirely and build something new, something fairer from the ground up.
Dismantle it. That's a strong idea.
It definitely raises fundamental questions about what a truly equitable society looks like.
So, wrapping up this deep dive,
Hmm.
it's clear the answer to is the American dream dead is, well, it's complicated. Not yes or no.
Definitely not.
We've seen the data, the economic gaps, the systemic problems making it tough to get ahead. We've heard those really powerful personal stories.
Yeah, stories of people navigating this changing reality.
But we've also explored how the dream itself might be changing, being redefined,
Hmm.
and looked at different ideas for the future, from policy to, shifting values.
Absolutely. We've seen how that historical ideal, especially the post-war one, is really clashing with today's economic realities.
Yeah.
Homeownership, wages versus productivity, student debt, the numbers are stark.
They really are.
But at the same time, you see this rise of new work models, entrepreneurship, these evolving ideas of success. It suggests that core desire for a better life, for opportunity, it's still there. It just might look very different now.
Mm-hmm. And that brings us to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to really mull over.
Yeah.
Maybe the most important question isn't whether the traditional American dream is dead, but whether it should be. Maybe it's time we all took a hard look at that old definition. Does it need replacing? Do we need a new vision? One that maybe prioritizes different things or is just built on a fairer foundation for everyone?
That's a powerful question to end on.
So ask yourself, what does a better, richer, fuller life truly mean to you in the world we live in today?